Good afternoon, Chad Moyer with you on the Rural Radio Network. It is time for the Channel Final Bell. And joining me on today's program, it is Jeff Peterson at Heartland Farm Partners in Lincoln. Well, we've got some positive markets to talk about today. We were led up by wheat futures. Just taking a look at where we settled out, Kansas City wheat July did settle 13.5 higher, and September was up 13.5 as well. In the corn futures, July was up 7 cents. New crop December up 6 3/4, so not far behind, and just slightly higher for soybeans. I know beans were back and forth throughout the day here. We did end 2 to 4 higher in the settlements on the soybeans. We'll talk about, we don't spend a lot of time on wheat here usually, but we are going to spend some more time on that today. But first of all, just your general impressions, Jeff. What were kind of the features of the market today?
Well, I think if you sit back and look at it, overall, just big picture, we know that this market had been getting pressed lower and lower, and as a result of that, we had a lot of pent-up buying that really was there. And if you think about it, the buyers, they sit back and they wait, and especially as these markets kind of come down, and at a certain point they'll step in, and we finally started seeing some of this. It showed up some yesterday and followed through on today. The bigger picture, if you really dig in and you look at it, the U.S. dollar index, we don't talk a lot about that, but it's had some weakness, and that really kind of started back with the communications that came out of Moody's back on Friday, where they talked about downgrading from the AAA down to the AA1. And, and that put a little pressure on the U.S. dollar. And anytime we see some pressure on the U.S. dollar, what we generally end up seeing is a little bit of support showing up over there, across the commodity, corn, soybeans, and the wheat side. But it really has been wheat in here that's really helped bring this market higher. So it's really good to see, Chad.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some of these commodities individually. And you did mention the wheat. And again, a second day in a row where we've seen higher moves here. And just today alone, up 13 from 12 to 14 cents in the Kansas City market. Minneapolis was up 10 to 12. Chicago wheat was up from 12 to 17 cents today. In your mind, Jeff, what's going on in wheat, and why all of a sudden do we see this little bit of turnaround, considering some of the other things that are going on, where we're at in the growing season, weather, things like that?
Yeah, because definitely this time of year, typically you would not see a kind of move, higher like this. Now, wheat has just got beat up. It just continued to get forced down, and really a lot of that has been because of what we've seen from the funds selling. The funds are holding some big shorts in wheat. And when you look at it across, the Chicago, Kansas City, Minneapolis exchanges, they're way over really probably 1 billion bushel short on the wheat side, which that's getting to be some big positions. And as you dig into that number, you'd say, okay, so what is it they're seeing, or more importantly, what's kind of changed? Well, if you dig in and look at the information, we know that with some of the heavy rains, there's continued talk of some, basically problems with the crop that could be showing up because of disease pressure coming in Kansas. We also hear of maybe coming out of Oklahoma, there could be some problems with the amount of acres that's going to be harvested, and maybe quality of wheat overall, just on those heavy rains that they had, here a few weeks ago. And then the other thing we did see yesterday is we did see that, good to excellent rating did drop a little bit on the wheat crop overall. And as a result of that, I think that gave the funds the confidence to start buying back some of that position. And then just like everything, and take, for instance, the Chicago wheat market, as we start buying back that market, then from a technical perspective, the technicians and the people that are just going to buy according to what they see in the wheat, they start getting rewarded. And, and that's a lot what we ended up seeing today. We were able to break through a high, and this is on the Kansas City wheat, high of kind of been at that 529 3/4 area. We broke through that today, and immediately upon getting upon that, that's an area that had really held for about 3 days. There was a bunch of buy orders setting in there, and then we come in, we broke through that 20-day moving average, and that just gave that wheat market some more strength. And and that was coming from the deeply overbought areas. Now, in addition to that, if you look at it, there's a few other things showing up across the world. You could say that the frost concern that's coming out of Russia is a little bit. We continue to hear of some concern on dryness coming out of China. and China may be out in the world market looking for a little wheat. So I think all those things came together finally to give that wheat market a little bit of life.
Yeah. You talked about the wheat market kind of being hammered down, just continue to push down and down. And it was far enough, I believe, they were starting to pencil in some rations of wheat into some, feedlot diets and things like that. Has it been long enough that is going to have an impact on usage, do you think? Or this move that we've had over the last couple of days, does that kind of cure that? What sort of relationship do you think that has with corn?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's cured it yet. I still think you're going to see that definitely pricing, especially at harvest time, as you start seeing some wider basis levels in some of that area. The other thing will be if we have any problems with the quality of the wheat, that definitely will end up being some of that wheat will end up going to feed wheat, and as a result, that will definitely price in some of the rations, and that will compete against corn in some of the areas. Now, you aren't going to see that really happening much in Nebraska, but as you move down into parts of, into Kansas and the Texas Panhandle stuff, that definitely can sure take place.
All right. Talk a little bit about corn. Anything, just 30 seconds or so left here, at least in first part. What are your thoughts on the corn market to start here today?
Well, I think a few things are going on the corn side. As you look at the planting progress, everybody say everything looks good. We're ahead of pace on corn. Nothing to really worry about. But as you dig deeper in the numbers, you've got a few states, in particular Illinois. And anytime you take a look at Illinois, and they've got some issues getting that crop in, it's not going as fast as they'd like, and that's also showing up there in Ohio and Kentucky, maybe parts of Michigan and North Carolina. And if you look at the radar out there and what's forecasted, it looks like those areas are going to end up picking up some more moisture. So I think you've got some question marks about, how many acres are we going to get planted on the corn crop.
All right, very good. We'll come back and talk more about corn in the second half of the channel Final Bell. We'll also hit on soybeans, kind of what the funds are doing, and then keys for the rest of the week in terms of trade. So stay tuned. The second half of the channel Final Bell is coming up here in just a few minutes on the Rural Radio Network.
Year, how much do we have exported when we look at what we have for exports, what we have for shipments, bring that all together, and we're actually ahead of pace by about 153 million bushels, meaning if we stayed on this current pace, we'd probably have an extra 153 million bushels of corn above our numbers. And what that really says is that would say tighten up stocks. Now, I don't think the number will be that big, but I think what it does say is that our export demand is higher than what USDA has factored in, and we will see some tighter ending stocks down the road. I wanted to go back and touch on a little discussion on the acre side. If you dig in and you look at those acres, as I've mentioned before, in some of the states that are behind, I think one of the question mark gets to be, before maybe the trade was thinking we were going to be above our 95.3 million acres, and maybe it was somewhere closer to 95.6 or 95.7, just with the planning pace and everything that was going on. Now I think what you have is you have some talk out there within the trade and people thinking, well, maybe we're going to come up a little bit short of our number or right at our number. So overall, the whole thought would have been, well, maybe this crop's going to get a little smaller. And I know I've touched on this in other reports, but there's also a few question marks on the yield. If we're getting this crop in some of these areas just a little bit later, ultimately, can we achieve that 181 yield? Now, the other side of that, though, I'd say, Chad, is the fact that now we come back to Western Corn Belt, and yes, we did pick up some nice rains, and we thank God very much for that, but it's not, we're not in great shape again, and everything's just fine. What we know across parts of South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, we're going to have continue to have timely rains because we didn't get that really big charge. Even though we got some good rains, our subsoil is not back perfect, so we're going to have timely rains. So you got too wet of conditions in some areas, too dry of conditions in others. We've still got really good demand in here. So, and then you put on top of that the technicals. Don't forget the funds were short corn. They flipped and went short corn, but a few things that's been happening is that they have been holding. We've got an uptrend line in place. We've been holding that nicely. Today we are finally able to break above that 450.5 on the July. Had a lot of buy orders in there. So the next thing that market's looking for, traded up to 454.5 today, actually 455.5. As we get up there towards that 200-day moving average in that 461 area, that's going to be an important level. I think we can get up there. I think we can get above it. I think we just got to have a little more time on that corn market, Chad.
Yeah, so let's continue with that thought. You know, they say you got to feed the bull, right? What is it going to take to keep the corn and soybeans moving higher, do you think?
Yeah, so as you come in here and some things, what can be some nice tailwinds? Well, as we continue to see the demand show up, and I mentioned the corn demand, but honestly, the bean numbers were good too. They weren't off the charts good on the inspection, but they're good enough. We're going to have to continue to see good demand. But then we're going to have some weather issues to show up to really keep that market going, because you got to think on the corn side, we got to get the funds back from being in a short position, and they got short probably 120,000 contracts. We got to get them back to the long side, and that's going to take some weather problems. If we don't get those weather problems, then that's going to be really, really hard to do. What else could help us in there? Could be some additional discussions on the trade side that are moving ahead. We know we've got that UK agreement. There's additional discussions going on with India. Looks like we're getting closer there, kind of back and forth on China, but we're gradually making our way forward with many of these agreements. So those are some of the things that we need to see to keep these markets moving higher.
What about other growing areas of the world, around the Black Sea, South America, Australia, things like that? Anything going on out there that we should be aware of?
Well, we want to continue to watch that Black Sea area. It does sound like maybe the Ukraine is going to put in a little bit more corn, but the weather hasn't been great there. And then as we go down to South America, it's kind of a mixed bag. We know we've got areas that have, within being reported out of like Buenos Aires, Argentina, they've had 3 to 4 times the amount of rainfall that they want. Now, I think that's getting more press, and there's actually going to be problems. That crop looks like it's going to be a very good crop, over 50 million metric tons on the soybean side, probably over 49 million metric tons on the beans. Maybe that crop could get shortened up a little bit because it's time to harvest, and they are harvesting down there. And, these too wet conditions can cause problems. We know we're just getting on the start of really harvesting that's happening on that safrinha corn crop, and they've got beans pretty well wrapped up. So that's how things are looking down there.
All right. So, again, a lot of things going on right now. If folks would like to follow along with what you're doing, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, give me a call at 402-366-4694. Check us out on the web at heartlandfarmpartners.com or follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jeff Peterson01.
Jeff Peterson, Heartland Farm Partners in Lincoln. Do remember, trading of commodity futures and options does involve a substantial risk of loss and might not be suitable for all investors. That is today's Channel Final Bell. It's brought to you by Channel and your local seed pros. I'm Chad Moyer on the Rural Radio Network.